What if Rimuru's Omni-Versal Journey Part 5? By JM 1001. What if the supreme deity Rimuru visited different universes? Rimuru has become Veldanava's successor, but unlike Veldanava and Rimuru being bored decides to go on an adventure and interact with other universes, becoming more powerful and having fun as he does so. Chapter 12, Bleach. Rimuru, so where are we going now, Seal? Seal, we will be arriving in the Bleach universe. I believe Master will find this universe quite amusing. Rimuru, ooh, and what makes you say that? Seal, no spoilers, Master. Rimuru, ahaha, okay, Seal. I guess I'll find out when we arrive. Rimuru then arrived through a portal that opened above the Soul King's palace. Rimuru immediately inspected the entire universe, looking through its history, power system, and all the way to the current and future events of this world. By the end, Rimuru could only think to himself, interesting indeed. So this Soul King holds the power of creation in this world but lacks any form of fighting ability. That's pretty problematic if you ask me. If he were to die, this world and all its different realms would be doomed. They'd literally fall down on top of one another like dominoes. Rimuru was trying to think of a way to solve this issue and came up with an idea. I think I've got an idea. I'll go talk to this Soul King first and see if he agrees. Rimuru then teleported to where the Soul King resides, only to see a being entrapped in a yellow, crystal-like substance and with no arms. The Soul King, still conscious, widened his eyes with shock upon seeing Rimuru. Rimuru, seeing this, knew the Soul King was aware and opened a thought communication between them. Rimuru, can you understand me? Soul King, yes, I can. Rimuru, that's good. Do you know who I am? Soul King, I knew of your predecessor, Lord Veldanava. Rimuru, ooh, you knew Lord Veldanava. Soul King, certainly. When Lord Veldanava created this universe, he tasked me with overseeing it. Rimuru, I see. Why did you remove your arms then? Soul King, my arms have a will of their own and were becoming defiant. They were too powerful to leave unchecked, so I had them removed and sealed away. Rimuru, I see. Makes sense. And then afterward, you cemented yourself to this world and became the pillar that holds these realms together. Soul King, yes, exactly. Rimuru, while I understand your reasoning, you do realize just how dangerous this is, right? If you die, then all these realms will fall apart and collapse on one another. Soul King, yes, I understand that, but that is why I have come up with countermeasures should I ever die. Rimuru, I see. Well, I could offer you one more countermeasure. I could create a parallel existence of yourself, transfer your consciousness to it, and hide your real body somewhere in the vastness of space. That way, should your parallel existence die, your consciousness would transfer back to your real body. Soul King, a very tempting offer, but I will have to decline. Rimuru, ooh, may I know your reason why? Soul King, like I said before, I have come up with suitable countermeasures to this, and truth be told, my only wish now is to die. Rimuru was surprised to hear this and could only ask, why? To which the Soul King stated, I have lived for a very long time and watched this world I made turn into a flourishing society. I believe this world's fate should be left to them to decide, and because of that, I am no longer needed. Now my only wish is to die and meet Lord Veldanava again in the true heavens. Rimuru let out a smile hearing the Soul King's words and could only reply with, I understand. It was then, however, when all of Squad Zero arrived and had their Zanpakuto pointed at Rimuru's back, with Ikibai saying, I don't know who you are, but you've made a big mistake coming here. Senjumaru, leave now or we'll be forced to kill you. Rimuru grew a sadistic smirk, stating, oh, and what makes you think your toys could hurt me? Squad Zero, now growing impatient, readied themselves to fight. But before it could escalate any further, The Soul King materialized an astral clone of himself made up of Ryuryoku and ushered for everyone to stop. Squad Zero, seeing this, put their blades away and kneeled to the Soul King. Ikaibai then asked, "Lord Soul King, sir, who is this individual?" To which the Soul King then answered through a sort of thought communication using Reihatsu, saying, "He is the God, creator, protector, and overwatcher of all existence. If you were to anger him, he could wipe out our entire universe in the blink of an eye if he so wished it." Hearing the Soul King's words, all of Squad Zero turned to Rimuru, still kneeling, and bowed. They all stated, "We apologize for our rudeness, Your Holiness." Rimuru, ahaha, don't worry about it. You are only protecting your master, and Rimuru is fine, drop the whole Your Holiness thing. Now please stand up, there's no need for you to continue kneeling. Squad Zero listened to Rimuru and stood up with Ikaibai asking, "Lord Rimuru, sir, what brings you here?" Rimuru, "I'm just currently traveling the Omniverse and am just making a stopover at your world. But after talking with the Soul King, I must say the power you use here is intriguing, so I might stay for a little." "Soul King, please stay as long as you would like, Lord Rimuru. My underlings would be more than happy to host you." "Rimuru, if that's so, then I would be more than happy to take you up on that offer." So with that, Rimuru was shown to a room he could stay in, located in Kiryo's domain. Chapter 13, Soul Society. The following day after Rimuru's arrival in the Soul King's palace, Rimuru was given a tour of the grounds by Ikaibai. Rimuru found all the facilities quite amusing. After finding out about the hot spring they had there and the qualities it held, Rimuru couldn't help but ask if he could use it later, to which Ikaibai agreed. The last facility Rimuru was shown belonged to Otsu, who is the creator of Zanpakuto and forges all of the Soul Society's blades. Once there, Rimuru was given the full history of Zanpakuto and what they call Bankai. Bankai is the final form of a Zanpakuto and takes a true master to achieve, but before they even reach that state, one must be able to hear and speak with the will of a Zanpakuto. Once someone achieves Bankai and activates it, it is a guaranteed hit on its target. Rimuru, finding this all quite amusing and interesting, started to wonder, if he had a Bankai, what would it be like? Rimuru then pulled his sword of Tempest out of his imaginary space and unsheathed it just a little. Even just unsheathing a tiny bit of Rimuru's sword caused it to radiate a deadly aura of turn null, which made Otsu and Ikaibai wince in fear, feeling that if they were to even touch the blade, they would die immediately. Rimuru, seeing Otsu's and Ikaibai's expressions, immediately sheathed his sword and apologized for scaring them after placing his sword back in his imaginary space. Rimuru then asked the both of them if there was anywhere he could use to potentially form his own Bankai. Ikaibai explained that while there wasn't a place in the Soul King's palace, there was in the Soul Society, as there was much more space down there. Rimuru, would it be okay if I went there then? Ikaibai, it is, but do you mind waiting until tomorrow? We will send a message down to them and take you there to introduce you ourselves. They have only just gotten over some issues and will likely take you for an intruder if you just showed up. Rimuru, very well, I will wait then. Rimuru and Ikaibai then left Otsu's domain and made their way back to the hot springs. Once there, Ikaibai departed from Rimuru and went back to his duties, leaving Rimuru to enjoy the hot spring. Rimuru got undressed, hopped in, and started to relax, closing his eyes. It was then when a portal opened up behind Rimuru. Rimuru stated, "I was wondering when you were going to come out." He then heard a small splash and felt someone sit on his lap and wrap their arms around his neck. Rimuru then opened his eyes to see Seal in front of him. Seal said, "Well, I saw you enjoying yourself and couldn't help myself." Rimuru then caressed Seal's cheek, pulled her in, and kissed her passionately. The two separated from the kiss and went back to enjoying the hot spring. Rimuru added, "I like this bath. It's relaxing, has healing properties, and can replenish mana. We should implement this back in Tempest. I'm sure everyone would love it." Seal, I agree. I have already analyzed the hot spring and come up with a suitable method for installation. Rimuru sank deeper into relaxation as he said, "Ah, that's great, Seal. You're the best." They continued to stay in the bath for a while. After getting out, Seal returned back to Rimuru's soul, and Rimuru was treated to a meal by Kiryu before returning back to his room. The following morning, Rimuru gathered with Ikaibai in the main courtyard and got ready to depart for the Soul Society. Rimuru, so just us is it? Ikaibai, yes. Bringing all of Squad Zero will only heighten everyone's agitation. Since it's just an introduction and the fact I don't plan on staying long, I feel that my presence alone will more than suffice. Rimuru, fair enough. Well then, shall we get moving? Ikaibai smiled and then activated the Oken, and the two began to teleport to the Soul Society. Once there, Rimuru and Ikaibai were greeted by all 13 court guard captains, with Yamamoto saying, "Greetings, Master Ikaibai. I am pleased to see you doing well. We received your message yesterday saying you were coming to the Soul Society but didn't specify what the reason was, but I assume the one standing next to you is that very reason." Ikaibai, you would be right, Yamamoto. This here is Rimuru, and he has been staying with us in the Soul King's palace as a guest of the Soul King himself. Make sure you treat him with the utmost respect. Hearing this, all the captains' eyes widened in surprise, hearing that Rimuru is the Soul King's guest, until Rimuru snapped them out of that shock by introducing himself. Rimuru, yes, hello everyone. I am Rimuru Tempest. I have come to the Soul Society to find a quiet place where I could train for a bit. Ikaibai here was kind enough to bring me to the Soul Society for that very reason. Yamamoto, we humbly welcome you, Rimuru, to the Soul Society and would be honored to host a guest of the Soul King. Rimuru then turned to Ikaibai before stating, "Thanks for the ride, Ikaibai. When I'm done here, I'll come back to the Soul Palace. No need to pick me up. I can get there myself." Ikaibai nodded and then returned to the Soul Palace, leaving Rimuru with the 13 court guard captains. Rimuru then turned to Yamamoto and the other captains, asking, "Rimuru, so, care to show me around?" Yamamoto then instructed Jashiro Yukitake to show Rimuru around the Soul Society, which he was more than happy to do. Jashiro showed Rimuru around, showing him the different divisions, the school, and the different places to eat and drink, ending their tour at his division. When they arrived, they were met with the sight of a few of Jashiro's squad members all huddled around the door to someone's room. Jashiro, seeing this, could only sigh as he and Rimuru approached. Jashiro asked, "Has she still not come out yet?" The squad members could only shake their heads, which made Jashiro sigh again. "Rimuru, what's the problem?" Jashiro, "Oh, a member of our team is struggling a bit. You see, a friend she made in the mortal realm lost his powers after dealing with a serious problem we faced only a few days ago. Because of this, he lost his Soul Reaper powers and can no longer see her. Ever since then, she's been in her room." Rimuru, I see. When you say problem, would you be referring to Aizen? And by friend, would you mean Ichigo? Jashiro was shocked to hear Rimuru knew exactly who he was talking about, with him only just able to say, "Yeah, that's right." Rimuru, all right. Would you call Rukia out here? I may be able to fix her mood. Jashiro was shocked again to hear that Rimuru knew who Rukia was, but putting aside his shock, he did what Rimuru asked. He knocked on Rukia's door and asked her to come out for a moment. Rukia reluctantly opened her door and came out with a depressed look on her face. Rukia, yes, Captain, you wanted to speak with me. Jashiro, well, actually, this man here wants to speak with you. Jashiro pointed to Rimuru, who was standing next to him. Rukia, who are you? I've never seen you before. Rimuru, I am Rimuru. I'm currently staying in the Soul Society as a guest for a little while, and your captain was nice enough to show me around. But then when we arrived here, I was informed of you being a bit depressed and thought I could help you. Rukia, oh yeah, and what can you do to help? Rimuru, how would you like to see your friend again? Rukia grew a little bit of hope when she asked, what do you mean? Rimuru, I mean your friend Ichigo. Would it make you happy if he got his powers back? Rukia, what, can you help him? Rimuru, I can. I can return his powers back to him. Rukia and Jushiro were both shocked to hear this, but Rukia was thrilled as she asked, really? Can you really do that for him? Rimuru, ahaha, for me it is but a simple task. However, I have come to the Soul Society to train. After I am done, bring me to him and I will restore his powers if he wants me to. Rukia was now on the verge of tears hearing this and hugged Rimuru as she said, thank you, Mr. Rimuru. Rimuru was a little surprised by the hug. But what was once surprise quickly turned to a smile as he patted her head, saying, it's all right. Someone as young as you shouldn't be so sad. Rukia then pulled away with a little frown as she stated, hey, I am not a kid. I am 150 years old. Rimuru, ahaha, well, to me you are still a child. Jushiro started to snicker, and soon Rimuru and Jushiro started to laugh, seeing Rukia become frustrated and try to retort back. Chapter 14, Null. After brightening Rukia's mood, Jushiro and Rukia showed Rimuru to a quiet cave where everyone comes to either practice or obtain their bankai. The cave was vast and opened with a large ledge that ran around the sides for viewers to watch. When they arrived, Rukia and Jushiro took a position to overwatch Rimuru, and Rimuru continued to walk until he reached the center of the vast cave. Once there, Rimuru took his sword out from imaginary space and began to slowly unsheath it. As Rimuru slowly unsheathed his sword, pure turn null began to radiate and pour off the blade. As soon as Rimuru started, Jushiro and Rukia immediately felt the intense and terrifying aura. Soon, as Rimuru unsheathed his sword more and more, the cave began to shake, and then the entire Soul Society began to shake along with it. This immediately caught the attention of all the captains and vice-captains, and they all started to make their way to the source of this pressure. Rimuru, realizing his sword's pressure was too much for the Soul Society to handle, put up a barrier around himself which stopped the shaking. As soon as Rimuru put up the barrier, Jushiro and Rukia fell to the ground with a sigh of relief. Rukia stated, "Ugh, I thought we were done for." Jushiro, sigh, that certainly was close. However, while Jushiro was acting innocent, deep down he could only think to himself, who the hell is this Rimuru? That pressure from his sword alone was far greater than even old man Yamamoto's and that aura. Rimuru, now with everything under control, stuck the tip of his blade in the ground and sat in front of it as he entered a meditative position. Rimuru then closed his eyes and, following the details told to him by Otsu, began to try and resonate with the will of his blade and enter the inner world where the blade's will resides. After only a couple of minutes, Rimuru found himself in the inner world of his blade. Once there, Rimuru realized it looked very similar to his imaginary space, like a vast galaxy that stretched on endlessly. Rimuru then noticed a being shrouded in pure darkness just staring at him, but upon further analysis, he realized they had the same appearance as himself. Rimuru then tried to call out to Seal but got no response. That is, until the being stated, "She's not here. Your skills are locked here, including Seal. It's just you and me here, and only we can reach this place." Rimuru, "Oh, I see. And who are you? Are you my sword's will?" The being just stood there motionless before answering. "I have waited for a long time for you to come here." Rimuru began to walk closer as he said, "Aha, yeah, sorry about that. I never thought about trying to communicate with my sword." The being, on the contrary, "I always knew we would meet eventually, but it certainly took longer than I expected." Rimuru, "Well, sorry to disappoint. Anyway, who are you? You certainly look like me." The being, "I am you, or a version of yourself. After bathing in your aura for so long, I gained consciousness." Rimuru, huh, so you're me but dark. All right, I'll call you Null. Null, Null, huh, it's acceptable. I'll allow it. Rimuru, all right, Null, what should we do now? Null, fight, of course. Rimuru, huh, why? Null, because I am your blade, and if you want to have full mastery over me, we must fight. Rimuru grew a devilish smirk as he said, all right, Null, let's fight then. Null then pulled out its sword, and Rimuru materialized a sword out of nothingness. The two dashed at each other with blitzing speed as their swords clashed. Little did Rimuru know, not only was he fighting in the inner world, but also in the real world. Null had materialized a form in the real world, and each of their clashes in the inner world mirrored what they did in reality. As Rimuru and Null began their intense battle, all the captains and vice-captains arrived in the cave, only to see an intense battle going on between Rimuru and a pure black version of himself, leaving them all wide-eyed and speechless. All the onlookers could see were sparks of light with the occasional sword lock, but be that as it may, everyone could feel their attacks through the ground as it reverberated. Back in the inner world, Rimuru and Null were exchanging intense blow after blow for about 10 minutes, moving so fast not even true dragons would be able to follow their movements. The two then entered into a sword lock, causing a massive shockwave from their pure strength alone. Both of them had smirks on their faces. Rimuru stated, "Ahaha, you know Null, this is the most fun I've had in ages. I haven't had a fight like this in a long time." Null, ahaha, I feel your sentiment. Please entertain me more. Null then sent a powerful front kick to Rimuru's stomach, sending him flying and crashing into the ground. Rimuru, still smirking, stood up and muttered, "Low blow, Null." Rimuru then dashed at incredible speed and slashed at Null's neck. Null parried Rimuru's attack to the side, but little did he know this was exactly what Rimuru wanted. Rimuru then grabbed Null by the collar and head-butted him before flinging Null over his shoulder, sending him crashing into the ground. As Null was standing up, Rimuru appeared in front of him and made a deadly slash. Null just reacted in time and blocked, but Rimuru's attack forced Null to take a knee. Null, noticing Rimuru's attack was forcing him to the ground, decided to let the flow of the attack take its course. He laid down and swept Rimuru's feet from under him. Null, seeing this as his chance, was about to try and stab Rimuru in the throat, but was stopped by Rimuru using his left foot to wedge Null's forearm in place. Rimuru then kicked Null in the face using his right leg, sending him sliding a few meters across the ground. Rimuru then did an acrobatic handstand, grabbing his sword off the ground as he did so, and readied himself to attack. Null just wiped the dirt off his face. The two stared at each other as they got into a battle stance, knowing this next attack would settle things. The two both then coated their swords in turn Null and leaped, slashing at each other. When their swords clashed, a massive explosion ensued, causing a blinding light. When the light finally died down, both Rimuru and Null were left standing with their backs facing each other, not moving an inch until Null's sword broke apart and he fell to the ground. Rimuru then turned around and walked over to Null. Rimuru bent down, rolled Null over, and lifted his head in his arms. Rimuru then stated, "That was a great battle, Null. I haven't had that much fun in ages." Null, aha, I had fun too. We should do this again sometime. Rimuru, aha, yes, I think I would like that a lot. Null, aha, you truly are strong, Rimuru. I always knew you were a worthy master. Now I am yours alone to wield. Null then touched Rimuru on the forehead and imparted the knowledge of how to use him properly before dispersing into turn Null particles. Rimuru then opened his eyes back in the real world only to find his sword in his hand and the land all around him completely devastated. Rimuru turned his head and noticed all the captains and vice-captains left speechless at the sight they had just witnessed. Rimuru could only let out a sigh as he thought to himself, "Here we go. This is gonna take some explaining. Damn you, Null. I'm gonna get you back for this next time." Chapter 15, Ikigo. As Rimuru walked over to the bewildered group before him, he sheathed what was formerly the Sword of Tempest, now null. He deactivated the barrier he had placed around himself and confronted the group. Everyone found it hard to even voice the one question they had on their minds until Shunsui Kairaku asked, "Who the hell are you?" Rimuru could only sigh, knowing this was coming, and responded with, "Someone not from this universe." Everyone immediately felt perplexed and confused by Rimuru's words, until Rimuru looked up to the ledge where Jushiro and Rukia were standing and yelled out, "Hey, little Rukia, I believe I have a promise to keep." Everyone just looked up to Rukia. Rukia, feeling everyone's gazes, didn't know what to do until Rimuru yelled out again, "Come on! Are you gonna stand there all day, or are we gonna go?" Rukia then slightly smiled, jumped down to Rimuru, and stated in a cocky but nice tone, "Hey, I've been waiting on you." Rimuru just smiled and rubbed Rukia's hair as he said, "Ooh, really now? Then what are we doing still standing here then?" The two then started to depart from the cave, with Rimuru saying, "You know, I could really go for some food before we go. Got anywhere we can eat first?" The two continued to talk, leaving a bewildered group of captains and vice-captains behind. Shunsui then turned to Jushiro and asked, "Hey Jushiro, you showed him around. Just who the hell is he, and what's this promise he has with Rukia?" Everyone listened as intently as they could, especially Byakuya and Renji. "Jushiro, I have no more of an idea than all of you, but as for the promise with Rukia, he said he can return Ichigo's powers." Hearing this, all of them were surprised, with Renji asking, "Wait, what? He can return Ichigo's powers? How is that even possible?" "Jushiro, believe me, I don't know. I was just as shocked when he declared it." Jushiro paused for a moment to collect his thoughts before stating, "Honestly, that's not even the most shocking part of all this." "Shunsui, what do you mean?" "Jushiro, well, I assume you all felt that immense pressure before, right?" "Byakuya, of course we did. Everyone in the Soul Society felt it." "Jushiro, that pressure wasn't caused by him, but by simply unsheathing his sword." Everyone was shocked again hearing Jushiro's words, until Shunsui stated, "That's one heck of a sword to be able to shake the entire Soul Society from simply unsheathing it. It takes old man Yamamoto to enter Bankai to even achieve something similar." "Kenpachi, so the guy's got a lot of spiritual pressure. It just means he's similar to me." "Jushiro, no, this was different. That sword wasn't emitting spiritual pressure but pure death." "Kenpachi, what do you mean?" "Jushiro, I don't know what it was, but for those moments before he enclosed himself in that barrier, me and Rukia knew immediately that if that aura touched us, it would mean certain death." Upon hearing Jushiro's statement, everyone could only think to themselves, just who is this Rimuru? A few hours later, after the captains and vice-captains had their talk and Rimuru had a meal with Rukia, Rimuru, Rukia, Byakuya, Renji, Toshiro, Hitsugaya, and Rangaku were getting ready to depart from the Soul Society to the mortal realm. It was decided by the captains to bring a large entourage to keep an eye on Rimuru and try to uncover more about his power. Toshiro then asked everyone ready?" To which everyone nodded. Toshiro gave a nod to the gatekeepers of the Senkamen to open the gate. The group departed for the mortal realm. After a bit of running, the group finally arrived in the mortal realm. Sparing no time, they made their way to Ichigo's high school. The group's timing couldn't have been better. They arrived a couple of minutes before the final bell rang. Ichigo began to depart from school with Chad, Oriheim, and Uryu until they turned the corner and saw the group. Oriheim called out Rukia's name. This got Ichigo's attention, but of course, he currently couldn't see anyone apart from a certain blue-haired individual. Rimuru then stepped forward to Ichigo and asked, "You're Ichigo, right?" With Ichigo replying, "Yeah, that's me. And who are you, kid?" The Soul Reapers were all shocked at the fact Ichigo could see Rimuru, with Rukia asking, "Wait, he can see you?" Rimuru turned to her saying, "Of course he can see me. From Ichigo's point of view, it looked like Rimuru just spoke to no one as if he was crazy. Rimuru then turned back to Ichigo and asked, "Hey, I have something I want to talk to you about. Would you come with me to somewhere private for a moment?" To which Ichigo agreed. Ichigo and Rimuru, along with Orihime, Chad, Uryu, and the rest of the Soul Reapers, walked to a quiet park before Ichigo asked, "So, what is it you want to talk to me about? I don't have any Soul Reaper powers, so I can't be of any use to you." Ichigo had a disheartened expression. Rimuru, "Yeah, about that. How would you like to get your powers back?" Ichigo had a surprised look on his face as he asked, "My powers? What do you mean, get them back?" Rimuru, "I mean exactly what it sounds like. I can give you your powers back." Ichigo could only think to himself, "I can get my powers back, but should I? Do they even need me?" Rimuru smiled as he said, "I know what you're thinking, and I can assure you, you are needed in this world." Ichigo was a bit apprehensive to accept. He had only recently thought that his Soul Reaper days were behind him and was trying to accept a normal life again. "Ichigo, who are you anyway? How do I know I can even trust you?" "Rimuru, my name is Rimuru, and the truth is, I am a god." Ichigo's eyes widened from shock as he stuttered, a god." Ichigo's reaction made Rimuru laugh, but this certainly wasn't the first time he had seen this reaction. And it wouldn't be the last. Ichigo wasn't the only one. Everyone else present had the same reaction upon hearing Rimuru declare he was a god. "Ichigo, should I be bowing now?" Rimuru, "Ahata, no, don't worry about that, Ichigo." Ichigo, "Okay. Rimuru sir, why would a god want to help me?" Rimuru, "Well, I made a promise to little Rukia to help you, and the truth is I have seen into this universe's future, and believe me, you are needed desperately." Ichigo, hearing a god declare he was needed and willing to help, was filled with a new sense of determination. He boldly looked Rimuru in the eyes and declared, "Okay, I'll do it. I'll get my powers back. If I'm needed that badly, then I won't hesitate." Rimuru smiled. "Ah boy, all right, stay still and close your eyes." Rimuru then approached Ichigo, placed his hand on his forehead, and asked Seal to handle the rest. In the next moment, Ichigo's spiritual pressure began to return to him and shot through the roof. Ichigo was now radiating pure spiritual pressure as his Soul Reaper powers came back. Slowly, as he opened his eyes, all the Soul Reapers were coming back into view. After a couple of minutes, Ichigo could clearly see everyone, and as he looked down to inspect himself, he saw his Zanpakuto and Soul Reaper uniform back on his person. Ichigo then looked over to see Rukia along with everyone else standing there with happy expressions. Ichigo smiled as Rukia said, "Welcome back, Ichigo." To which Ichigo responded with, "Yeah, I'm back, Rukia."